Hi there, I'm Mysca, and recently I played Sekiro Shadows Die Twice for about an hour. This was a brand new build and I was loaded into different parts of it, so I've seen quite a bit of the game now. And whilst I wasn't able to really grasp a lot of the components, you'll see that some of the gameplay is a bit rough in places. I was loaded into a pretty late save and was able to get quite a lot of info. I'm going to compile all of that info here. I'm also keeping this video as spoiler free as possible, but there will be some spoiler warnings before I mention certain things, and I will give you time to click off the video if you don't want to see that particular part. I'm no Dark Souls expert, but I tried to do as much research as I could. For some reason, the difficulty right at the start of the game as well is much higher than it was at the Gamescom demo, so I hope you think this video is good enough at least. The mention of no stat upgrades and Sekiro not being an RPG in the Dark Souls-like way has come up so many times, and I want to address this because there's a bit of a misconception. Sekiro has ridiculous combat depth with a lot of customization. Dying in Sekiro is a bit different than a lot of people seem to think, because previously we just know that there won't be a Dark Souls style corpse run, but instead something else to fully dying. I will reveal what that something else is, so if you don't want to know what that is, and this is not just that one extra revive, then you can skip forward if you don't want this part spoiled. But honestly, this is just quite useful info for Dark Souls fans and anyone else interested. It's not much of a spoiler, it's in the game from the beginning. Alright, dying in Sekiro is not just an extra life before you are reset to the bonfire. You can replenish your combat revive by killing big enemies or resting at shrines as well, so there are ways to keep going without fully dying. The more you fully die though, the more the game will punish you. Whenever you die, you will lose half of your experience towards your current level, and half of your coin, your sen, will also be lost when you die, and you can't just go and pick this up afterwards either. You can see that this screenshot here says that there is no known way to avoid this either, except whenever you die, you have a chance of not getting punished at all through the unseen aid. On your pause screen, you will see what your chance of an unseen aid when dying is. This was 30% by default for me and seemed to stay there. However, if you die too many times, you'll be struck with even worse penalties and debuffs that seem to be temporary. But they can last for quite a while, and they include dizziness effects and other negative debuffs according to one of the playtesters on site that I talked to. And there were a lot of horrible pop-up messages in games with debuffs that I don't have footage of, unfortunately, and I'm not sure how much I can talk about them anyway. There was also something about a horrible disease or a cough or something that was another debuff in there. So to say that Dark Souls punishes dying more than Sekiro would be somewhat inaccurate. They just punish dying in different ways. Next up, I want to give you an idea of just how in-depth the combat can get. This got really overwhelming, honestly, when I was loaded into that other save. Beginning with items, I have a pretty long list of them actually. I'm pretty sure some of these have not been seen before either, but I was loaded into a later save, and that's when I started picking up all sorts of weird things. Many of these are similar to Dark Souls items though, but if you still want to skip this item list, you can use the timestamp on screen. I don't really think there's like a spoiler in here though. Alright, let's take a look. These graphics are made by me based on images and text that popped up in game when I picked things up. Healing Gourd. This is essentially your Estus flask, and you've seen this probably be used before. I only had one charge from the beginning, but there were ways to add more charges. I'll mention that later, but I don't have full details. Next, the pellet. The medicinal pellets, they're basically like small heals over time that you can pop. They heal a certain amount of HP over a little bit of time. You usually have quite a few charges of these, and they're not too hard to find either. Dowsing powder is used for healing burns. When you are burned, your character acts in a bit of a different way. I'm not quite sure how this helps, especially against burns, other than the description here, but this was also present quite a bit. The Mibu Balloon of Wealth basically increases your chance to pick up more coins from the drops of the different enemies. There's quite a bit of drops from the enemies, so I assume this is good if you know that you have a lot of enemies in front of you and you want to get some more of that sen or coin. Next, the ceramic shard, which is basically your typical throw a rock in stealth mode type of thing. You can throw it at an enemy to draw their attention. I assume you can throw it close to them as well. Fistful of Ash. I found this one a decent amount too, and you can just throw this at an enemy to temporarily distract them. This seems to be more of a getaway tool. If you aggroed an enemy already and you just want to throw this at them and then disappear. Didn't seem too rare either. Next was the oil. This one was from the later save as well, and it basically just enhances the fire damage you do. So if you have a weapon that's burning or a prosthetic that provides fire damage, then this will make the enemy more vulnerable to that, at least to the burn status of it. Snapseed is pretty interesting. This breaks illusions and seems really good against enemies that create illusions around you, and I assume it basically just removes those illusions entirely. So this is probably a fairly rare item. The light coin purse is essentially the Dark Souls soul that you can pick up when you find those souls around that you can just keep in your inventory. You won't lose these when you die, and you can just use them later on so it's a good way to keep some zen on you. Next is the HOMEWARD idol. This is basically just a reusable HOMEWARD bone, so you can actually use this repeatedly. And I had this straight from the start of the game too. These were most of the items I saw. There was also a white spirit emblem that we've seen previously. This replenishes prosthetic tool use. So it's kind of like your ammo for prosthetic tools. I noticed that they were highlighted red after a while. I'd used them, but I don't think it's like one per use. Honestly, not quite sure, but these have dropped a lot anyway. There was also an item I found at one point that essentially improved your Estus flask. It was kind of like an Estus shard, I guess. You had to give it to someone to improve your healing gourd. And I also found a candy at some point that supposedly would help with posture, so it would make your posture harder to break for a little bit of time. But I'm sure there's many more items that I didn't see either. Moving on, regarding information about the prosthetic arm, there are quite a bit of different attachments, and I don't even want to reveal them if I knew all of them, but many of these have been revealed already, and I don't have gameplay of all of them, but spoiler warnings regardless. Feel free to skip to the timestamp on screen. Alright, there's things like the firecrackers to stun, the axe that you've seen previously to break through wooden shields, and there's also a metal umbrella that I didn't get to see personally, but basically it just blocks enemy heavy attacks. Seems pretty cool. And all of these can be cycled through mid-combat from your 3 slots of your prosthetic arm attachment. You have 3 separate skill trees that actually upgrade your character in different ways. One for stealth abilities, one focused on general sword combat, and then one that upgrades your prosthetic arm and the attachments in various ways. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to use many of the different techniques and sword art special moves because I didn't have them for some time. And then when I got one, I didn't realize I actually had it because I was loaded into that save that I talked about. But there were no available right from the start, and there was just way too much stuff to go through later on. I hope those main pieces of info though were useful to give you a better idea of what Sekiro has to offer. The combat is very deep and honestly to some degree more difficult than Dark Souls, as there's a lot more choices to be made around combat. It's not just your loadout and your build determining what you can kind of do. Sure, there's the items, but also just all of the different prosthetics, the moves, the skill tree and such really changes things up. There were some things I wasn't able to show you and that I can't really talk about either, but finally a minor spoiler warning for some boss info. This will not have anything to do with lore or story around these bosses though. These bosses have also been revealed previously, timestamp on screen to skip again, but either way, unfortunately I actually missed both big boss fights, and this seemed to be the case for almost everyone there. I was a bit sad at first that I missed these, because I thought I had done poorly since they were in the reference document we were given before we went to the event. However, it turned out that the first one of those is about 40 to 60 minutes into the game, or at least the build we were playing. So with the extra 20 minutes of tutorial before that as well, then only a bit more than an hour of time, I would only have gotten to the big proper bosses if I basically played perfectly. The first one of those was Gyobo Masataka Oniwa, we've seen in this official teaser. The second one was Lady Butterfly, who we've also seen in an official teaser. I believe a couple bosses around the map have also been moved around a bit, and once again this gameplay build was not final either, but things had definitely changed in terms of placement and overall map stuff from the Gamescom demo. Alright, that's all for this time. I will hopefully have a full Sekiro review of the PC version out in not too long. I went with the PC version since I wanted to test stability and such, so do subscribe if you'd like to see that down the line. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was good enough. Like I said, I'm no Dark Souls veteran. I have played quite a bit of Dark Souls 1 and then some of Dark Souls 3 as well. But yeah, not a lot of time to play and a lot to go through. I did my best. Alright, that's everything. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.